Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, our Teacher Professional Development Online. We are pleased to have today one of our colleagues, Tim Blessey, who is going to be talking about making argumentation work in online environments. He's worked very hard to make this session useful for you. We've got everybody here. Look at all those faces. Wave, everybody. Hello, hello, hello. This is great. It's so nice to see everybody. So Tim is going to take over and share his screen. And I'm going to stall.
Okay, stalling.
I'm stalling. Mike Lechuga, it's so nice to see your face. I was so surprised to see you the other day. I haven't seen you in ages.
All right. Are we good to go, Robert?
Yeah.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming and online on a Saturday morning after spending probably the better part of your last month online. We really appreciate all you do for your students, and we have some interesting things planned for today. We're going to take a little adventure looking at how we can make one of the science practices work in an online environment. So my name is Tim Blessey. It's nice to see so many familiar faces and some new ones out there. For those that I haven't met, I've been a teacher professional development coordinator at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science for the last 6 years. And for 31 years before that, I was a classroom teacher, just like you guys, teaching a mixture of things, everything from 3rd grade to 12th grade at some time or other, about 10 years of high school, and most of it was in middle school. So let's get going on this morning's program. First of all, I want you to know that Robert and I have had the great privilege of spending a lot of time talking to teachers over the last month and just seeing how bravely you have all jumped into this adventure of teaching at a distance from your students. None of us saw it probably coming, and it's been a brand new learning experience. And I've just been so amazed by the courage of everybody. I picked up the Week magazine this week, and the editor of the magazine said, you know, a month ago, I could never imagine some of the things that I'm using technology for, like having a Seder meal on Google Hangouts, or Zoom chats with my kindergarten child's teacher. And then, quote, you can see it here on the screen, my expectations of virtual learning were pretty low, abysmally low, they said. Now I see my son's virtual classes made possible by a combination of technology and the heroic efforts of teachers who have made themselves available on a video chat almost 24/7 as an amazing island of stability. And so I just wanted to start by thanking all of you for being that island of stability for so many kids out there in the middle of this pandemic. And you know, you are a hero every bit as much as nurses and people who work in the grocery stores. And so I just wanted to let you know I appreciate that, and know that you know, moving forward, we realize that this is not business as usual, nothing that you haven't discovered, and that you know, the expectation, I think, for ourselves has to be small shifts. I hope that that's been your expectation. It's like you have to establish a whole new classroom culture. It's like September all over again, but it's April. And so what we do today, you're going to see maybe some of the things I try go off the rails, and I know you've probably seen some things go off the rails, but it's a great opportunity for us to show growth mindset. You know, we preach it, but how often are we in the classroom in a vulnerable position where we don't know what's coming next or how to do it? And I think it's a great way to model for our students what that really looks like instead of just preaching. So third of all, today, I want you to take care of yourself, get up, do what you need to do, because you're taking care of the whole world. You're trying to take care of your own children in your homes while you're taking care of others people's children. So I won't be offended if you just disappear and you're off somewhere getting something out of the refrigerator. Please do that, and just know that we're here for you in any way we can. The one thing I'm seeing that comes out of this version of teaching that's really wonderful is the gift of serendipity. You know, how many of you have seen like somebody's dog jump up in their lap while you're meeting with them? Or I have a teacher friend who said that her kindergartners were on the camera with her the other morning, and grandpa was behind the kindergarten in the room behind getting dressed in the morning, and she was just trying to ignore it and not like, but it was too funny. So there's going to be a lot of surprises that are going to be joyful and funny, as well as, you know, stressful. So with that, where are we going today? So here's where we're going today. Um, working memory in human beings, especially in our little human beings, is very limited. It's a working space where you have to hold on to ideas and you have to think if they're important, and you have to hold on to them long enough to use them for something. And when you start throwing in all this technology, that becomes a real issue, because I'm trying to remember how to open the chat while I'm also trying to teach you, or while you're trying to remember the math that I'm teaching. So we're first going to start out the morning by looking at some digital tools and doing a quick run through of some of the tools we'll be using in this workshop. And then we're going to use those tools to engage in the practice of argumentation. And we're going to kind of have two focuses to that in the next 2.5 hours. And the first focus is going to be, why argumentation? Honestly, if you were raised in the normal American education system, that word probably didn't even pop up until maybe you were in college. And so why are we pushing for this in K-12, and what is it exactly? So we'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then we're going to hope you walk away with at least 3 or so protocols that you can go and try online with your students to get them engaged in argumentation. So we're going to go into breakout, so you'll get to interact with peers, because a lot of you are probably already learning a lot of things about this, and it'll be great to share those. So let's go ahead with our digital tools run through. Okay, as we said, relationship is going to have to be the most important thing at this time. Adults are stressed out, kids are stressed out. Bell Hooks in 1994 said, to teach in a manner that respects and cares for the souls of our students is essential if we're to provide the necessary conditions where learning can most deeply and intimately begin. We know from cognitive science that people's emotional state and how grounded they are has everything to do with whether memory formation can even happen, whether or not learning is is pleasurable, or something that they end up disliking. So we're going to take time today to start practicing that, and you might practice it with your students. If you look on your toolbar at the bottom, you'll see a button that says reactions. And throughout the day today, whenever you hear something that somebody says was well done or well stated, like, wow, that was beautiful, I never thought of it that way, give them a clap, give them a clap. And if you hear something that you really resonate with, like, yeah, go to preach, hit the thumbs up button. So let's go ahead and try either do the clap or the thumbs up right now, and we'll see if that appears in the window. You can practice. It's on the reactions button at the bottom. It looks like a smiley face, and you click on that. And there's a couple. Ooh, I see Caitlin clapping, giving her thumbs up. Anne Marie gave a thumbs up. All right. Okay, Robert, does it look like most people are finding that?
I think so.
Okay. Okay. Well, remember. Yeah, remember, in the chat, Robert will forward all your questions to me, and he'll help solve tech problems as they come along. Okay,
if you, just I'll chime in, because there are some people that say they can't find it. So mine is on the toolbar at the bottom, and it's the last button. It's got a smiley face on it. And if you hover over the bottom, yeah, thank you, Joanna. That's a good tip. If you just hover over, your toolbar will open up. So if you see the reactions there. Now, here's the thing. We have discovered that Chromebooks are problematic with Zoom in terms of tools. So if you have a Chromebook, just sort of squirrel that off to the side. It might be a Chromebook issue.
Yeah, and in general too, sometimes if you can't find a button you're looking for, there's usually a 3 dots somewhere on there, 3 dots at the end of your toolbar, and that gives you more options. So try that out too. Okay, but it's a simple way. You can't have the kids all talking at the same time, right? So it's a great way for them to affirm each other. Now, we're also going to be working in the chat a lot as a way to do discourse, because we can't, again, have everybody talking all at the same time, although we can do that in small breakout groups. So in a word or a phrase, I want you to type in the chat right now, what's keeping you grounded? Think of something that's keeping you track. And this is something you want to do with your students, is do a emotional check-in with them to see how they're doing. So in the chat, type something that's keeping you grounded. I saw this as a multiple choice question earlier this week in a webinar, and somebody said food. Food's not there. Food is the only thing keeping me grounded right now. So, okay, so I'm not seeing, let's see, are people, yeah, okay, I see, yeah, positive positive presumptization. I love that word. Yeah, to presume positive intent, faith. Yeah, a lot of things can be misread in a chat or in an email, and so it's good to assume positive intent,
I
faith.
like how Mike put my wife, my dog, and my chickens in that order. It's a good thing you put your wife in before the chickens. So.
Yeah, having had chickens, I think dogs really rate higher there. Yeah. Okay, so scroll through those for a minute and see what's keeping other people grounded. All right, so now we've learned to use the chat and the reactions button. Another thing we're going to be doing all through today is polling. And there's a lot of different ways to do polling, but Zoom has built-in polls. And if you feel free to, like Robert said, to email us if you're struggling with any of this technology. You set these polls up when you set up the meeting. So when you go to set up your meeting, at the bottom of the screen will be polls. And Robert, do you mind putting up our first poll of the day? Robert's an amazing multitasker, you guys. Okay, so you can now see the poll. How are you connecting with your students now mostly? I know different districts are requiring different things. Just go ahead and click the option that works for you. Okay, the one that you see most often that you're doing.
Oh, this is
I think
interesting.
I think we made it a multiple choice, yeah, so that you could check more than one.
Now, if
Robert,
for some reason you don't see the poll, the question is, so are you primarily interacting with your students synchronously every day, once or twice a week, through one-on-one check-ins, or asynchronously giving assignments through the web or offline? So if you don't have the poll, just type in the chat as well.
yeah.
I think the
Okay,
results
Robert,
are
I'm going to go
settling
ahead.
in.
Okay, so did you share the results, Robert?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so when I'm looking at it, it looks like people are mostly asynchronously or maybe synchronously once a week. The strategies we're going to feature later in the workshop, I think, work perfectly, especially for those situations. If you were to do it every day, I think you're going to have to really spend some time working on a lot of protocols. So, all right. So
Heather's asking the question, do you have to have a paid subscription to use the polls?
no, Robert and I at first thought you did, but indeed you don't.
Yeah.
Polls
The,
are
tr
free.
the trick is you have to go in the settings of Zoom, not a meeting, but in the settings of Zoom, and you have to scroll down. And if Heather, if you're not sure where to find it, you can stick around after during a break or something like that. Anybody, and you have to put the settings for polls. You have to turn it on because it defaults to it being off.
Oh, yeah. And the thing is that how would I use polls in argumentation? You're going to see today, we're going to use polls to let students make a claim. So a good argumentation has at least more than one claim or shades of a claim. And so it's a great way to let them make a claim. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that just voting raises the curiosity level of the hormones in your blood that have to do with curiosity. And so just making a vote is an important thing. Okay, so we're going to try the breakout thing now, and we're not going to have you trying to do a heavy cognitive task about teaching in science while trying to learn how to use the breakout. So here goes our brave adventure into breakouts, although teachers we're working with really love this feature the most. They like talking to other teachers. So you can use this with kids, and it's also free. So here's your prompt. What has been most surprising or maybe most interesting about teaching your students at a distance? Okay. So the way that this breakout thing works is this. So just follow me on the screen for a minute. I have the prompt on the left, and moving into your breakout groups, when I say go in just a minute, you're going to see this pop up on your screen. It's going to say the host is inviting you to join a breakout room, and you just simply say join. You click join. But before you click join, could everybody, every time we do this today, can you look carefully at what your room number is? Because we're going to have you going into a folder and opening documents, and each group will have their own document or their own folder with your room number on it. So notice your breakout group first, and then click join. And when you do, a little message will automatically pop up saying that you're joining the breakout room, and give it a few seconds and you will magically pop into a room with 3 or 4 people. And when you're in that room, this is what we're going to do. This time and every time, the first person who pops into the room is going to play the part of host. So and what's that mean? They're going to get the discussion started and report back later to the larger group. So if you're the first person in that room, you can either be host or designate, say, I don't want to be host, will somebody else do it, and get it started, but you get things started. Second of all, everybody's going to introduce themselves and say where you teach. Then you're going to give everyone a chance to talk. So please give everyone a chance to talk. If during that time you're confused about, like, what are we doing? We can't find this document. We don't know what to do. At the bottom of your screen, you will see a little question mark icon that says ask for help. And if you click that, either Robert or I can pop into your room and we can help you solve your problem. Okay, so be sure to know that that button's there to ask for help. Then when this is all over, which will be about 5 to 10 minutes from now, you will see a little message pop up on your screen that looks like this, saying that the breakout room is going to close in 1 minute. And then after 59 seconds, during that 59 seconds, you can either finish up your conversation and wait to be popped out. And literally, you don't have to do anything, so don't be stressed. It'll bring you back. But if you don't want to sit around and wait, go ahead and click that on the right that says leave now. And when you do, you'll see this little box pop up saying it's bringing you back to the main session. So that's a lot of directions, but just know that most of it's automated and you can ask for help, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and here's your prompt. What has been most surprising or interesting about distance learning so far for you? And I'm going to go ahead and send us all into our breakout groups.
And I'll put that question in the chat so you can reference it when you're in your breakout room. So let me send that.
Okay, so let's see, Robert, we got 33 people, and I think I will assign them into 8 rooms, 32 participants into 8 rooms. Okay, here you go.
4 people in a room.
4 people in a room to start? Yeah, okay, here we go. Look for the little message to pop up on your screen and go ahead and click accept. Yes, hi Shirley, we can hear you.
Oh yes, I work at Westerly Creek in Denver, in Stapleton area. And I work with autism kids. So I've been doing autistic and I've been doing some Discovery Link stuff over this time that we've been out.
Oh, good, good. Well, so glad, nice of you to join us. At this point now, we're back in the whole group. So this is good. We're back in the whole group, but I'm so glad that you were able to join us this morning. So we're asking everybody when we're in the whole group to hit the mute button. So thanks for introducing yourself. And then do you mind hitting that little microphone again? You'll see it turn red. And then when you want to talk, just hit it and we'll open it up again. Because that way we won't hear background noises at people's houses. Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, I think it looks like everybody is back from the chat. So welcome back, everybody. I'm gonna ask at least one person from a couple of groups to unmute their mic and to tell us something that you heard that people are finding interesting or fun about distance learning or surprising. So let's start with group number 4, Richard. Good to see you on the line. Do you mind unmuting your mic and telling us something that your group said?
Hi.
Hi, Richard.
I was trying to find the unmute section. Our group, we had a nice collection of people from all the way from Dallas to different parts of Colorado. And one of the teachers talked about a kind of a neat strategy that they used, which was a scavenger hunt in their virtual room that she would say, all right, everybody go find a shoe, and then they get a point for bringing something back. So I thought that was a cool idea.
Great way to make you comfortable with the technology. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Thanks for sharing that. You can go ahead and mute yourself again. And how about someone from breakout group, Mike? in breakout group 7. You want to mute yourself, Mike Lechuga?
Okay. One of the fascinating things we found was the level of engagement and the creativity of some of the teachers. Those were both pretty inspiring.
Yeah, I think we forget too that kids are a lot more into this technology thing than some of us that were not born in that land. And so, it's a great opportunity to try some new things. Now, some of you might be.
I want to go back very quickly. Sorry, Tim.
No, that's fine.
Ted, I think it's important for kids to ground them in that learning environment that we're in with their home. And I think that trying to go run and find something in your house, it sort of bridges that connection that you're in a safe place. This is new and everything, but it's familiar. I think that's a really nice way of grounding. And the moments of time when we can actually do that, of thinking, well, what is it that I can help to connect learning with their house, will serve us really, really well, actually.
Yeah. And, and I heard this week about a teacher that had kids making circuits by taking different objects in their living room, like, pillows and candles and things, and lining them up. And then they were the electron running through the objects, and then making video and sending it to the whole class. So yeah, I think that, yeah, it's if home is a safe place, it's a great way to tie home to school. Okay, thank you, Robert, for that interesting comment too. So, okay, so we're gonna move on to next. And if anybody is feeling a little stressed out, like I finally figured out how to turn my microphone on, just take a deep breath, shake it off. We're learning ourselves all these things. Other people like, okay, we're done nothing I haven't already learned, but we're getting there. So now that we've learned about 3 or 4 tools, we're gonna use tools to practice argumentation, this thing called argumentation, what it's about today. And as I mentioned, our first focus is gonna be about what is argumentation and why should I be doing it with kindergartners or 8th graders, and here's a little bit about that. So you all know that right now we're shifting to new state standards in 2020 and 2021. This is sort of a transition year. And I know from being a teacher that when I hear new state standards, my head wants to explode. It's like, oh God, now I got to redo the curriculum and start copying and pasting all those numbers. So the good thing about, Robert and I feel really good about this particular shift in the standards, partly because it's what good teachers have always been doing. A lot of these things are what good teachers have always been doing, but also it's just an opportunity, I think, to engage kids more than the way we've done science sometimes. And so let me tell you a little bit about that. So it comes from something called the Next Generation Science Standards, and then the Colorado academic standards for science are almost identical. Our new standards are almost identical to those. So you'll be able to share ideas with teachers across the country who are doing the same things. Now, how is it different? The big shift, if you were to take one thing away from what the new standards are doing, they're shifting from spending all your time learning about science and engineering to figuring out science and engineering. In other words, you get the chance not only to learn what scientists have discovered, but to kind of practice being a science yourself, figuring things out. And it's what they call phenomena driven. And here's what it would look like. So previously in science, we would teach kids about a scientific principle. In high school, it might be like latent heat or something like that. Or in elementary school, it might be in grades, it might be about the seasons. And then we would do an activity or a lab that let them see that phenomena in real life. Okay. But the new way we're doing it is we show them the phenomena. You have them actually start with ice and melt it and take it to boiling, and they see that the temperature just disappears, like it goes flat for a while. And you're like, huh, I wonder what's causing that. And instead of teaching them about latent heat, they figure that out. They figure out what's causing that and this phenomena. Or in seasons, you give them like different interesting things, and they say, now I wonder why that we look at the temperatures for the last 5 days, and I wonder why overall it's getting colder and colder over the last month. For example, in engineering, it might look like this. Students used to learn about a principle of engineering design and then apply that to a human problem. Like, we're going to teach you what makes a strong structure, and then you're going to build a bridge. But now instead we say, we need to build a bridge to help these people get across the river. And then they're going to try to build bridges, and a lot of them are going to collapse. And in the process, they're going to learn about what makes a strong structure. So I hope you all see that it's more about figuring out than just learning about. And it's going to raise the next generation of scientists. And it's also in a generation of information. Even if you don't become a scientist, you're going to learn when to be suspicious of scientists. You're going to learn when to trust scientists because you understand what they do. All right. So in order to figure things out, kids have to be taught these basic 8 practices of science. They have to learn how to ask questions or how to plan investigations. Today, our focus is going to be on practice number 6 and 7, about constructing explanations like, okay, I saw this phenomena, I think what's going on, let me tell you my theory of what's going on with why the ball keeps bouncing lower and lower and lower. Or argument, and argument is it my explanation is different than yours, so let's compare them and figure out where we agree and where we don't, and which part we both don't understand. So that's what argumentation is going back and forth with our explanations and trying to figure it out. So I'm going to let you watch a quick video that kind of sums up what argumentation is. I think I got the settings on. If anybody shows video, I got to warn you, there's a, when you put up your screen, you have to click a little box that says show audio. I learned that the hard way. So here's the video. Here goes my favorite part. So is that not like teaching? You finally get most of the kids on board, and then a new kid comes back from being sick, and they're like, what's going on? So anyway, yeah, you get to see the process of argumentation. So here's our kind of quick definitions for the day. I want to distinguish between the argument versus the process argumentation. So the noun, the thing we create, is called an argument, and the process we do is called argumentation. So an argument is a sequence of statements or reasons given with the aim of demonstrating that a claim is true. So I'm going to try to prove to you guys that my explanation is right. Some people call this an explanation instead of an argument, and that's okay, either way. The thing is got a claim trying to prove that something's true or false. And we call it CER. If some of you have been trained in claims, evidence, and reasoning. In math, you might call it a proof. And in engineering, you might call it a solution. And it's linking evidence to a claim by applying your reason. To say, here's what I think is going on, here's my evidence, and this is what's going on in my head that makes me think that's what it means. Okay, now the process of argumentation, when you bring it up with students or the public, or even most of us teachers who were never scientists, we picture this. We picture a fight, or we picture a debate. And certainly in science, I'm not going to lie, there are egos involved. But the purpose, really, if you think about it, in science, all scientists would agree, is the exact opposite. Instead of the purpose being to win, the purpose is to build knowledge. Like, you're going to help me by arguing with me. You're going to help me get this straightened out and make it better, to understand better what causes lightning. So the purpose is actually to help each other, not to win. I'm sorry, I switched over. Okay. The first step, of course, in the process is to write your argument, to construct your claim, your evidence, and your reasoning. The second part is to get it challenged, to go to other people, have them challenge it, help to think about your design and how you can improve it and get closer to the truth, get closer to understanding what's going on. And this is really what today's webinar is about from now until noon, about getting your students to challenge each other, to improve their arguments, to design them online. So that's what we're going to be doing. Okay, now I would argue that argumentation is more important than ever, but I'm going to let Kristen Myers, who's a DPS teacher, tell you what she told her students this week. And I think it's really in these times where we're like, oh, I just want to go back to school. I can't take this anymore, doing this the way we're doing it. Let Kristen talk about what she told her students. Kirsten.
Something that I just was teaching my kids this week is that the difficulty with digital learning is that you are all often so isolated, and we can speak and we can think and we can write, and talking about those three kind of modes is thinking and speaking and writing. But if we think and we speak and we write just with ourselves, how deep can our understanding go?
Oh. Sorry, user error.
Writing, but there's something that is critical about discourse with other people and having a multifaceted perspective, and you only get that through discourse, whether that's reading other people's thinking, whether that's speaking to them with your words. And a lot of times I'll tell kids, let's think with our pencils, or let's speak with our pencils. That's really, I think, a belief of mine around what discourse is and the role that it plays and what understanding is.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the volume on that. A CEBC was good enough to share this video with me, and that's the loudest I could get it turned up. So anyway, yes, I think that students right now, a PEBC is the Public Education and Business Coalition. They do great PD. If you ever get a chance, check them out. They do great professional development. So kids right now are isolated. They're not with each other. They might be with each other on social media, but that only fills part of their need. Students need to feel that they are seen and heard by you. And that's hard to have them all talking on Zoom at the same time, right? Because it's just chaos. So one way to do that is to get them to engage in argumentation and in chat, and get them to engage in argumentation with each other. And so they also need to interact with their peers and share their thinking. That it's not only about being on social media and sharing what's fun right now and what you're doing, but also about, I want to share my thinking. Kids like to think on some level. It's work, but they like to have some time of their life doing that. And finally, it's opportunities for me to work collaboratively to build meaning. Kirsten definitely made that point that I alone can only come to understand the world so far. We need each other. We need each other not only for emotional support, but we need each other to make sense of what's going on around us. And argumentation is the way that scientists and all of us do that, not just scientists. Okay, so of course, doing it as opposed to talking about doing it with students is a challenge, because all talk is not necessarily building meaning. So I want you to think for a second, take a piece of paper next to you and a pen or a pencil, and I want you to jot down 3 words or phrases that you think would represent things that are essential if you're going to plan a good argumentation session. For example, I might type in trust. Students are not going to share their ideas unless they trust you and trust their classmates. Think of 3 things, jot them down, and then when you're ready, go ahead and type those in the chat. Sandy says willingness to take risks. Yep. Sarah's saying trust, context, and time. Right. They have to have something interesting to talk about. That context idea, Sarah, is so important. Yeah. Heather says modeling. Right. I don't think you can just explain it and then think they're going to start doing it. You have to model it. Respect, honor. I really like, teachers, I find more than most PD providers and administrators, they lead with those affective things. We know that what makes it successful or not. You guys can read what's in the chat there. Please do, so because there's so many good things coming up. But yeah, we have to start with that sense of like, your interior life before we start working on your head life. Because if I feel unstable or don't trust you or I'm in an abusive situation, it's going to be very hard for me to engage in making meaning. Open-mindedness, yeah, there has to be some sense of and purpose and relevance. Like, why should I care about this thing you want me to argue about? Yeah, these are all great. Okay, so I know that you came to share your ideas, what's in your head, and we're learning from each other. The next thing we're going to do is that we're going to go ahead and go to breakout rooms, but we're going to try to learn from some of the experts that have been doing research on this. Okay, here's our first big adventure today, technology adventure, which is to stay in Zoom, but to go ahead and get into, open a document that we can read. Okay, so in a moment, everybody just, you don't have to do anything right now until we explain the process. And then again, if you lose us, you hit the wrong button and we disappear, just go ahead and go back to the email and start over. But what you're gonna do is when I say go, you're gonna hit escape, which will minimize your Zoom screen. The escape button on your computer will minimize the Zoom screen. On my screen, you probably, hopefully right now see a tiny URL. And you can either write that tiny URL down, or Robert is going to send that URL out in the chat. He's going to send it out in the chat. For some of you, it will be a live link. It will be blue, and you can just click on that link, and it will open the document for you. For others of you, you will see it, but it won't be live. It'll be black. It won't be a blue live link. If it's not live, you can do one of two things. If you're on a Mac computer, try right-clicking, which is a challenge on a Mac, but try right-clicking and you can see open URL and it'll open it for you. Otherwise, you're going to have to copy and paste that. Now, some of you might really have trouble with copying and pasting it into the browser. You open Chrome or you open Safari and you copy and paste it in there. But if you have trouble, I would suggest writing it on a piece of paper and just typing it into there. So we're going to go ahead and hit escape to make Zoom smaller. And we're going to go ahead and try to open those documents. And remember, we build routines. First time will be a challenge. After that, it'll get easier. So go ahead and try it. Let us know in the chat if you're struggling. Robert, are you hearing anything from anybody or?
Nope.
Okay.
Everybody's okay, or everybody?
Yeah. After everybody gets the document open, you'll open it and you'll see a bunch of folders. You're going to open it'll be a folder that contains a bunch of folders. So go, okay, then, yeah, some of you, I got the link in the email and opened it, so it's already open for you. If you got the link before, go ahead and go to the folder that says elements of strong argumentation and open that folder. Thanks, Sandy, for reminding me that I sent out that link. It's in the email too, if anybody needs it. Go to the small breakout room. And just so you know, when we're in small breakouts doing actual work, which is what we're going to be doing from here on, I'd like you to listen and ask questions. Make your primary focus learning from your peers, not sharing every idea you have. So be sure to learn from them. That's why you came here today, really, to learn. And so that was more a note to me than you. Okay, evidence, don't forget to support your thinking with evidence. When you tell people something you think, be sure to tell them what led you to think that. Also, respect and gratitude. Be sure to thank people for participating. You know, it takes courage, and you don't know each other, you don't necessarily trust each other. So thank them and recognize them just for the act of sharing and for what they shared. When you do disagree, which I think it's important that we do because that's how we learn, is argumentation, is you need to try to disagree with the idea, not the person. Instead of saying, well, I don't agree with you, Sandy, You need to say, this idea that somebody suggests that such and such is true, I'm not sure I agree with that idea, and disagree with the idea rather than the person. Okay, now that we got the norms, you're going to go into the breakout room. The first person to get into this room is going to be the host, but listen carefully. Whoever goes in the room first is going to assign one of the 4 articles in your folder. You'll see we're breakout group 5. So you'll open folder 5 and you'll say, okay, Robert, you're going to be, you'll read article 1, it's 2 paragraphs. Tim, you'll read article 2, it's 2 paragraphs. Then you're going to give everybody 5 minutes to read those 2 paragraphs and think about how it shows what's necessary to plan strong argumentation. Then 8 minutes, you'll have 8 minutes to discuss. You'll have 2 minutes each to discuss what you learned from that article about what makes for a good argumentation session. And then you're going to introduce yourself, discuss what you read in the and how it relates to the prompt, and please give everybody a chance to share in that 8 minutes. And then click the Ask for Help button if you're struggling or having any problems. Okay, we are here. You can always ask for help and I'll pop over and help. I'm going to go ahead and put everybody into their breakout groups. And you'll be in there, hopefully, if all goes well, you'll be in there with the same people you were in there before. So I'm going to open those rooms now.
Yeah, it closed on us. We're all here.
Okay, good. Thank you for letting me know, Joanna. Hey, if you guys can find Joanna's picture and click on it, I would like to call out Joanna in particular right now. She is my hero for a few reasons. So if you can find her, and Joanna, you can unmute your mic. You are unmuted, right? Yeah. Joanna Nearing, I'll let her introduce herself and tell you what she does, and then I'll tell you why she's the hero of the day. So Joanna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
It's funny because we were just talking in my group how we all now know why our students don't want to put on their videos because you have to get like in the spotlight or something. But I think Tim has just introduced me because I'm an online teacher and I've been doing this for about 8 years, 8 to 10. I guess I'm actually on 10th year. I always say 8. But anyway, so I took his class last summer all the way through the fall with Argument ADI. And loved it so much. I'm trying to get more people in our district to actually take it and try to adapt it to online learners. And it is more difficult because I've done it in person because we do have something called blended. And it's much easier for group work and to look at each other's work and critique each other's. Definitely in person, it's much more easy than it is online. But I've tried to adapt it as much as possible. And I think that's why we're here today, is to see how to adapt it to online learning. So.
Thanks, Joanna. And you guys can imagine when I heard the whole world was going online, I thought, who's my expert? Who can I call on? And you're going to get a link afterwards to this. And Joanna not only shared a lot of like good tips about doing a webinar, but she also shared several of her online argument-driven inquiry labs that she's created. And I'll put the link to those for that resource in the letter that follows up this workshop. We're actually going to do one of those at the end, or a modified version of one of those, with Joanna being here, and you can ask her questions, specific questions about like, yeah, does that really work with kids? You know, how does it work? So we're going to do that as one of our last thing today. So I'm going to go back to screen sharing. So you should be able, if you want to move the documents off to the side and go back where you can see Zoom. Okay, you know, you can have breakout groups share out. And sometimes you feel after popping into groups that it's necessary in order to get the main idea, like they just didn't get it. And other times, you know, just the act of talking itself cements long-term memory. And I heard some really thorough, interesting discussion in all 4 breakout groups that I popped into. So those of you who aren't familiar with Zoom, you can, as a teacher, pop in and listen to what they're doing. I'm going to move along. So there's 3 key points I'd like us to take away from that last discussion and the reading of the articles. First, somebody has their microphone unmuted. If you can look up and make sure you're muted to cut down on background noises. We'll cut out the dogs for now.
Oh, sorry, that's me.
Oh, okay. So there's 3 key points. The first is that uncertainty is the driver of argumentation. That, you know, it's not engaging if there's no mystery. Like if you tell them the answer and then tell them, I wonder what the answer is, there's pretty much not much interest in argumentation. There has to be something missing. There have to be competing claims or explanations and alternative ideas. And I'm going to tell you in a minute a good source of those if you're looking for a good, based on people's common misconceptions. There also, you need to think about tools. What protocol will get the talk going in the time I have? Like, in what way am I going to, is it going to be like a, stamp your claim and then talk in the chat? Or is it going to be breakout groups? Or what are you going to do as a protocol that allows them to talk? And finally, culture. I think that all teachers are bought into inquiry. I think that most teachers are bought into argumentation. But if you walk into most teachers' classrooms, it's back to stand and deliver. It's all about just talking. And that's because as soon as they turn on their microphones, it becomes chaos. Even in your own classroom, it becomes chaos. And so we're like, oh, I don't like this. This isn't good. And so we assume that when you tell kids, well, as a group, we don't know the answer. We're going to figure it out, that they're going to be, oh, gee, golly gee, Wally, I'm really curious. And so I really want to figure this out. But instead, you're going to find that they're like, tell us the answer. They've been fed in an education system that gives them the answer, and they're going to freak out. They're going to be like, can't you just tell us the answer? And so you have to set up a system where it's safe and say, well, the way real scientists learn is they make mistakes. Remember how many times you fell off the bicycle before you learned it? That's what we're going to do together, but it's going to be the adventure of discovery. And I don't want to rob you of that discovery. So don't worry, you're going to fail. That's what I expect, and then move on. Okay, finally. Okay, sources. If you want to do what we just did, have kids open articles and then have an argumentation session with each other, a good source of that, Newsella, is now free to everybody because of the crisis until the end of the year. So you can go on there. They have something called pro-con arguments. Some are social studies, some are science, and it's a good source of like debate. You can get 3 or 4, an article that has 2 or 3 points of view, and you could divide that up and have the kids each take a different point of view and then have to argue about that. Another one that we love, Robert and I, is Paige Keeley's Probes. If you look up, it's called Uncovering Student, Robert, if you can type that in the chat, Uncovering Student Thinking. And what Paige Keeley has done is she's gone through using the AAAS, American Association for the Advancement of Science, looked at the common misconceptions that all Americans have about everything, about the seasons, about the moon, about everything. And then she creates these real life examples where you read about it and one person thinks this is what's going on and another person thinks this is what's going on, and they have to choose which person they agree with and then give their evidence for why they think that's true. So A, you're rooting out common misconceptions, and B, you have a ready source of argumentation. There's a bit of, mystery in what the right answer is. So check out those resources. Okay, so I think we've all been sitting here without a break and we are ready to transition, but hopefully you got an idea. I started thinking about what do I got to do to make argumentation successful so you don't naively walk into a session where everybody's microphone's on, you haven't set it up as it's something they're even interested in, and then they all start talking and it's chaos. So you have to think about all those steps in planning. We're going to take a break. It's about 11:15, and then we're going to come back, and we'll come back in about 5 to 10 minutes. Let's just say 5 till 11. And in our last hour, we're going to do some of this together. We're going to practice 3 different protocols together that you might be able to walk away and use this week with your students. So are there any, you can unmute yourself if you have any questions before we go to break. Otherwise, we'll just go to break. I'm listening. Otherwise, take a break. Go get something to eat. Drink your coffee. Take care of any needs. Okay, I think I just made my screen a visual. Robert, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, as we move into the section about protocols, it's important to remember what Sam Bennett here, shown in the picture, an educator, says, that predictable rituals and routines are important for students to know what to expect so that the unpredictable, student thinking and making meaning, things that they don't know, can happen. And I just think that's an important reminder as you start these new things. Again, you're starting the school year over. And just like you have to show them where to turn in where to turn in your work and how to write things in your science notebook, we're all having to teach them how to chat and how to do these things. It's stressful, and they're not going to be able to think about science until they feel like those routines are predictable. So work on, if you get one of these protocols down, I do it several times before you try the next protocol. And I'm going to try to do them in the order of simplest to most complicated right now. So I'm going to introduce you to a new tool that you can use that we'll use for the rest of the time we're together, and that is stamping or annotating. So if everybody wants to look in the upper part of your screen, you'll see you are looking at Tim Blessey's screen, or Tim Blessey is sharing his screen, and then you'll see view options off to the right. And if you scroll down, you will see lower down, annotate. And if you click on annotate, a separate little menu is going to open up that looks like this. Now, if you're on an iPad, you will see a slightly different one. Like iPads can't do stamping, but iPads can do drawing. They can do checking or drawing. So go ahead and see if you can pull that down. And then, yes, you have my permission to play all over my screen. You can draw on it, you can stamp on it, you can write on it, and just try practicing that. I see hearts and stars, and I see people writing. Oh, someone says hi. And if someone does something inappropriate, you can quickly grab that and you can erase it. In fact, I am not quick with that right now, and I should be. If I were ever teaching real kids, I'd be ready to erase that quickly. Well, I see why, because I have your pictures on top of my controls and every other thing. So, yeah. Okay, yeah, look at, oh, we got some real artists in this group. Okay, and I want you to realize something that I didn't at the beginning, which is once you give kids this capability, they're not gonna wanna just make one check mark, right? So you need to really think about how you can provide a play area. As you'll see in a minute, I'm gonna provide a play area. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, but what does this have to do with argumentation? Again, you can share the screen and students can draw a model of how they think this is working, or they can stamp the claim that they think is the best claim. And it's a little more playful and fun than just doing polls. I'm going to clear everybody. So if everybody can stop stamping for a minute, clear all drawings. I can't, there's also an option to turn that off. I'd rather not turn it off. So if you guys, if you can hold off stamping for a minute, I'd rather not turn off that option. So here we go. Okay, so here's how you might, let's have everybody practice. Okay, if you notice on my screen here, I'm asking you to stamp or check one stamp or one check in the season that's your favorite. If you don't live in Colorado, you can choose your own favorite season. But in the play area, then go ahead and stamp like crazy or draw whatever you want in the play area. But I only want one stamp from each person in the stamp area. And I would tell kids that this is how I can see your vote. But if you abuse this, then we won't be able to use stamping. So I gave you a play area, play down there while you're waiting. And then, oh, we got somebody who likes winter, yeah. But just do one stamp in the boxes below the seasons. So here's our 4 claims, you know, what's your favorite season? I'm gonna move your pictures out of the way so I can get back to my controls. Okay, everybody have a little fun there? Okay, we can see that looks like by far the most popular season is summer. I don't know about everybody here, but I would agree with that. Okay, I need to get my annotation bar. Robert, are you able to clear everybody? Just so I can concentrate on what comes next as my co-host.
Hold on a second.
Okay, I'm clearing. Clear all drawings. Got it. Okay. The first protocol we're going to try is called, I'm calling it Poland chat, okay? And the way it can be done synchronously or asynchronously, but you can either send out sort of a poll if you don't have students, say, I'm going to give you this Page Keeley Pro. I want you to read it, and I want you to choose which of the 4 explanations you like the best, and then each of you is going to send me a Google Doc explaining what your evidence is. But that would be asynchronous. We're going to do it synchronously. So Poland chat is an argumentation protocol which allows students to make a claim, to support that claim with evidence and reasoning, to challenge each other's arguments, and to revise and strengthen those arguments. So here's our phenomena. Here's the weird thing we're trying to figure out. This girl, Maddie, it's summer and she's made a glass of lemonade and she goes outside and she's sitting there with it. And because it's a warm day and her lemonade's warm, she's put ice in it. And she starts to notice that the lemonade, which was warm, starts to get cold. And she also starts to notice that, that it's starting, not only is the lemonade getting cold, but that she is noticing that the ice is melting. So she wonders, I wonder if what's going on is that the coldness is moving from the ice out into the lemonade. On the other hand, she thinks, could it be that maybe the warmth is moving from the lemonade into the ice and making it melt? And her third one is that, well, maybe the cold is going from the ice into the lemonade and the heat is going from the lemonade into the ice. Maybe they're both going on. So I'm going to pull up a poll and ask you to vote what you think. Now, remember, when we do this, it's not going to be as authentic with people who have degrees in chemistry as it would be with 7th graders or even 11th graders. These are all based on real people's misconceptions on the street. So Robert, can you put our poll up for us, please? Thank you. Okay, go ahead and vote. Is it A, it's moving from the ice into the lemonade? Is it B, it's moving from the, I don't know why it says here, my apologies, from the lemonade into the ice? The heat is moving from the lemonade to the ice. And it's moving from coldness, and there it is, it doesn't say heat. Coldness and heat are moving back and forth. Apologize for the typos. Okay, we got 53, I can see about 59, 79. We got most of you in. I think we got over 90 people, 90% of people in, Robert. So if you want to go ahead and share the poll. Okay. So you all can see the results. And if you do this with students, there will be almost equal probably. You'll see almost equal. But yeah, even among adults, that's where she got this poll from, Paige Keeley. You will see that there's not, people aren't sure about this. So it's a really good example of an argumentation task because there is uncertainty. There's more than one claim and some uncertainty. So Robert, you want to stop sharing the poll and we'll clear that out. Okay, so let's go to that's the poll part. Let's go to the chat part. So I want you on the right, I want you to open your chat if it's closed, and I would like you to chat, I chose B because, I chose A because, and be brave, be brave. Again, the way we learn is by making mistakes. And if you have any one of these ideas in your head, A, B, or C, know that there are a lot of other Americans that share that idea with you. What evidence do you see? I chose C because I felt that the heat was going into me when I held a cup of coffee in my hands. I felt the cold go into me when I touched a piece of ice or the railing in front of my house. What made you think that? What evidence from your life? Robert, you want to read out a few of the things people are reading? Do you mind? Writing?
I chose because I think molecules move in both heat and cold. I chose B because molecules at higher temp move more quickly. I chose B because heat moves from where there is more heat to where there is less.
What about an A? Do we have any A's? You A's, be brave out there and tell us why you thought so.
Let's see, what else do we have here? I chose C because when I hold a cup of coffee, I know the coffee is warming my hand, but I know my cold hand is cooling off the coffee.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. I would have not naturally thought of that my hand is having an effect on the coffee, but maybe it is, huh? That's an interesting idea. Yes.
And Richard's pointing out, because he was at Patrick Brown's webinar we had the other day, that he references, Pat references as preconceptions rather than misconception.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right. Misconception has baggage, right? I apologize. It sounds like somebody's going to be wrong here. But no, the way science learns is nobody knows the answer. Everybody's wrong to begin with. Okay. I'm going to move on to, okay, so everybody reading some ideas. So everybody here, if you look back at your Zoom screen now from the chat, probably has one of three sort of models in their head going on. They can see this. Oh, maybe you can. They're going to see that the cold, represented in blue here, is moving out from the ice into the liquid. And other people are probably seeing that the heat from the liquid is moving into the ice. And people who chose C are seeing more like this. They're seeing both things going on, cold and heat both moving back and forth. So the question would be, if I were to do this with students and I had enough time online, I would say, okay, here's some equipment. I'm going to give you a beaker with you have 2 beakers with tap water, and you have 2 Erlenmeyer flasks or 2 bottles. And you can even have them try it at home if they have bottles and big cups at home. And in the one bottle, you're going to put cold water with, and put some blue food coloring in there so we know it's cold. And in the other bottle, you're going to put some red food coloring. Or you could just let them design the investigation. Say you got red and blue food coloring, you got cold, hot, and medium water, you got some big cups. Let them design the investigation if you have time. And then say, use this equipment to try to prove which one of these 3 claims is correct. Okay, and then or you can show this video. I'm going to start the video. Here we go. There's the cold water going into the tap water. Here's the hot water going into the tap water. Big difference. Okay, so we're watching this video, and then what I would do next, and in the interest of time, because I think you'd like to see a couple, 2 or 3 protocols, I'm not going to have you actually do this, but what I would do next is I would open the chat again, and I would say, you know, this is just one case study, one example of hot and cold. It's not even the one Maddie had, right? But it is one example. And this example, do you think it's giving evidence that supports claim A, that the cold is moving into the hot? Or do you think it's supporting the idea B, that the hot's moving into the cold? Or do you think it's supporting C, that both are going on? Which claim do you think it's supporting? And tell me what you saw, not what you think, but what you saw that makes you think it was more claim B or more claim A or more claim C. And I would let them type that in the chat. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me a thumbs up if that makes sense, what you would do next. Remember, it's under reactions. You have like a reactions button. Okay, and then, oh, somebody's got a hand closed. No, I'm sorry, that's Heather. I just can't see the thumb. Okay, all right, so type in the chat if you have questions about that. Let's check that out first, and then we'll move on to protocol number 2 if no one has questions. But please ask questions, because I want you to walk away. I think this is probably the simplest one. You can do it synchronously using the actual chat, or you can do it asynchronously by sending something out to them, having them write their thinking, and then sending it back, and then you show examples on the screen of what other kids were thinking. I'm not seeing anything appear in the chat. Are you, Robert?
There's
okay.
a rendering from
Wait,
Nikki.
okay.
Joni is confused. How would they write?
Yeah, if it was asynchronous, I think Joni's asking, I would send home like one of the Page Keeley probes that has, 3 or 4 claims, and say, I'm asking you to react to this and say which of these claims you like, and then on the digital or real paper, whatever you have them doing, I want you to write out evidence from your life that makes you think that. And then you could, when you collect those, you're going to collect some examples and just call anonymous student A, anonymous student B. And the next assignment you send out to them, either on paper or digitally, say, here's what evidence other people had. Click, go to YouTube, watch this video, and now give your reaction. Which claim do you like better now and why? And that's how I would do it asynchronously. Does that help, Joni? You can unmute yourself. Oh, and I like Nikki's already got another phenomena to have kids think about. That's great. Okay, so I'm going to move on to number 2. And the second one, okay, so the second the second one is going to involve us doing this. We're going to have an all-class discussion, which, if you've tried it, is until they got the small steps down, I wouldn't let them chat at all. I wouldn't let them talk. I just have them do it all in the chat because it just becomes chaos. We heard about 3 second grade teachers that did a combined Zoom session with like 100 second graders and did not mute everybody. And they just had to end it after about 15 minutes. So until they got the chat down, I wouldn't try this. Now, what we're going to have you guys do is learn to raise your hand so that when we're in the whole class, we can have you raise your hand. So this is what it will look like. You will, go back to controlling my screen. Okay, if you look on your screen, you will see where it says participants. And if you click on that, it will open this box and show all these people that are on here with us. At the bottom, you will see a little blue hand, which represents raising your hand. So when we get ready to have our discussion, I'm going to have you stay muted and raise your hand if you would like to share. Then I'm going to see your hand and I'm going to unmute you and say, go ahead, Pam, what was your question or what was your thinking? You can raise your hand to talk. Okay, if you're not finding that blue hand, let Robert know. You have to click on participants, then you have to look at the bottom of that window and click raising your hand. Okay, let's just try everybody raising their hand before we do this. Oh, I see Pam's hand. I feel like that lady on Romper Room, for those of you that are old. I see Tiffany, and I see Christine, and I see, it was this kid show like Captain Kangaroo that, and I loved it when the lady said, I see you, I see you. And we would get so excited. She saw us, even though she didn't really. Okay, so we got some hand raising. I see a couple people that haven't. Get on the chat and let Robert know if you're having trouble with hand raising. Okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Oh, by the way, before we...
Joni has issues because they never called her name.
Oh. I know. And definitely if your name was Tanisha, the white romper room lady in 1960. Yeah, there were all kinds of problems back then. It wasn't, it wasn't all the great things people talk about. Okay, so anyway, looking, before we move on from the Poland chat, here's another example from Paige Keeley. When you look at the crescent moon, how much of the moon is actually lit up, okay? Now, okay, we did agree, disagree, stamp. This is our new protocol, agree, disagree, stamp. And so it's an argumentation scaffolding strategy that elicits prior thinking. I would use it at the beginning to get students to think about making a claim and giving their preliminary evidence and reasoning. If you were in the classroom, this would look like this. It would look like 4 corners, or some people call it agree, disagree line. I want you to go to this side of the room if you agree, that side of the room if you disagree. Some people call it take a stand, but it's sort of that strategy in the virtual world. So here we go. I'm showing you 2 experiments. And this experiment on the left, investigation number 1 on the left, shows 2 thermometers, and the ends of these thermometers were covered up with construction paper. One thermometer had gray construction paper on it, and the other thermometer had white construction paper on it. And they were put out in the sun at the same angle for like 10 minutes. They were laid on the sidewalk for like 10 minutes. One of the thermometers had gray construction paper wrapped around the end of it, and the other one had white construction paper. And they got a bunch of temperatures. The dots represent the temperatures, and they made a bar graph for the average of the gray thermometer and the average of the white thermometer. And the gray thermometer, when they took all those temperatures and averaged them, they were about 52. And the white thermometers were about 45. That's our first investigation. The second investigation was investigating the question of who sleeps more, cats or dogs, and how certain are we? So they decided to measure how long their dog slept and how long cats slept. And they did it with several dogs and several cats, and they found out that the average dog sleeps for 7.4 hours a day, and the average cat sleeps for an astounding, I got to move your picture so I can see it, 8.2 hours per day. So the first experiment, the thermometers, they came to the conclusion that this proves, they thought that this proved that thermometers covered up in paper will heat up faster than the ones that are covered in white. And the second one, they thought that proved that cats sleep more hours than dogs. Because the cat number was higher than the dog number, that proves that cats sleep longer than dogs. And because the gray thermometer was bigger than the white thermometer number, they said that proves gray heated up more. So this is my prompt for the group. Here's my argumentation prompt. Which investigation claim would you trust more? Would you trust the one about the thermometers more, that those people are right? Or would you trust the animal people, the cats and dogs people? And I want you, we're gonna have an all class discussion, and I'm gonna call on people with their hands raised and ask you, if you wanna unraise your hand, just click that blue button and it'll unraise it. But I wanna ask you, why do you think so? Why do you trust the thermometers more than the animal experiment? Or why do you trust the animal experiment more than the thermometer experiment? Okay, so I'll let you look at that. And instead of going out to small group, we're gonna have an all group discussion. And the way I know you would like to talk is you're gonna go down to participants and click to raise your hand. And again, if you raise your hand accidentally, you can click that blue thing again and you unraise your hand. Okay, so I'm gonna scroll through and find somebody with their hand raised. Take a second to look at it. And a lot of you are like, I don't want to look wrong in front of the whole class. That teaches us something about our students. They don't either. So we would let them do small group talking sometimes, maybe a pair share before we share with the whole class. Important part of argumentation is feeling safe. Okay, but I got a couple hands, so I'm going to call on one of those people just to say they're thinking. Okay, I'm going to unmute you, Chris Blow. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, Chris, but
That's
could you?
okay.
Yeah, can you share us, which one of these experiments do you trust more and why?
I trust investigation number 1 more because they have more data. They also don't have as many they have the cats and dogs, they have a real big outlier on the cats that I think is skewing their data. So I think that they have more data points for investigation 1, which makes it seem more like they have reliable data.
Okay, so Chris, I'm going to help because I'm trying to help our teacher group, if you don't mind, separate out the difference between evidence and reasoning, because I'm hearing evidence and reasoning both from you, and I appreciate. Let's give Chris a thumbs up on our reaction for being the person who is willing to venture out there in front of the whole class and give his opinion. Oh, I see some thumbs up, Chris. They're with you. Even if everything wasn't right, then they're still with you. Okay, because we're going to learn from whatever you said, good or bad. Okay, so one thing Chris said is he trusts number 1 more because they have more data. But that would be sort of reasoning, because the fact that there's more data is in Chris's head, because he says there's more data, but I don't see data in this picture. So Chris, could you break it down for us a little bit? Evidence is what you see. What did you see that made you think there was more data for one?
I see more points on the graph for each different experiment. So more points for gray and more points for white than I see in the other one.
Yeah, so the evidence is more dots. That means more data. And the reasoning was that more dots would mean more data. Now, another layer of reasoning would be, Chris, why do you think more dots should be trusted more? Why should more data be trusted more than less dots?
Because the more times you try something and get the same result, the more you're proving that that result is going to happen every time you do it.
Yeah. I think even in everyday life, that would be true. That the more something happens over and over, the less I think that it's an accident. Although I know a lot of people that, including myself, that keep making the same stupid mistakes and we think it's somebody else's fault. But in general, the more things happen, the more we think that it's not an accident, right? It's probably, there's a reason for that. So Chris, that was excellent. Thank you very much. Chris's other point had to do with outliers. And I'm gonna take somebody else that raised their hand and talk about that or talk about something else, if you had something else. I'm gonna go ahead and unmute, thanks again, Chris. I'm gonna unmute Joanna. Joanna, let's see, you're unmuted. Did you want to make the point about the outliers, or did you want to make a different point? You can do whatever you want.
Well, I wanted to say that investigation 2 has less reliability because you don't know the age of the cats or dogs. So they could have older cats sleeping longer versus younger puppies who are very athletic and, rambunctious, not sleeping as much, or maybe puppies do sleep more, but the ages might not be the same, whereas in investigation 1, they're the exact same thermometer, same amount of time, different color construction paper was the only variable. Well, there could be a lot other variables in the investigation too. So less reliable, that investigation.
Again, let's give her a thumbs up or a clap. Yes, I think that we need to push our students in these uncertainty tasks to say, what are the possible sources of error? What things don't we know? We don't know about whether those, I told you those thermometers at the same angle, but we may not have known that. And what about the cats and dogs? We don't know if they're all the same age. Maybe that one cat is really sick. We don't know that. We don't know if they were all healthy or what age they were. And we need to get students to start thinking about and writing in their arguments about things that could make these results untrustworthy. I believe that the reason a lot of people in the United States think that the world is flat, or they don't believe that climate change may be a real thing, a little bit has to do with the fact that they don't understand how scientists assess certainty and how explicit. Every scientific paper has a whole section about all the things that we may not have done right, or that we may not know, or that could be throwing our results off. That scientists are very transparent about that. And I think people don't trust them because we don't have kids in school practicing that. That's what science really does. Try to poke holes in your own. Okay, the outlier thing, Chris said that. I want to make sure we get time to go through the last one too, but Chris said the outlier thing. Would somebody raise their hand and be willing to explain the group? What did Chris see that made him say the word outlier? And why would an outlier be troublesome? Would somebody raise their hand and explain what an outlier is, what you see, as well as why how it throws things off? I'm looking for a hand. Robert, you see one? You want to call on somebody? Oh, I see several. Okay, so I see Carolyn happens to be on my 3 people I can see. Carolyn, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, do you mind explaining, what does Chris see that he called an outlier, and why is it a problem?
Well, an outlier, if you look at the cats, it's above 12. So approximately 14 hours a day that cat is sleeping. It gets to the way that things are being done mathematically. If they look for the average, which is the mean, and maybe they should have used the mode or the most frequent one. So which way are we going to go mathematically with this might depend on what you're thinking with your answers.
Yeah, that mathematically, if you throw one really huge number in here, it's going to throw that number off. It looks much higher than it is, really, probably for most cats, because that one number is making that 8 much higher. And so should we trust an experiment where one cat is throwing off the results? And so, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing is if they'd used a histogram, you might see this more clearly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I didn't realize until recently that, you know what, the most trustworthy measure of the center, a math teacher taught me this, the most trustworthy measure of the center, it's not the average. It's actually the median. If you take all the numbers and you work your way into the middle, the median can be trusted a lot more than the average. But because for a long time, you know, if you have 100 data points, crossing them off one at a time until you could find the middle number took way too much time. But with computers now and spreadsheets, you can do it in a second. You can find the median and it's much more trustworthy. Okay, so there are other things you could look at here before we move on to our last protocol. One would be how much overlap are there in the 2 groups? So for example, if you look at the thermometers, there's a lot of dots in the gray that are way above any of the dots in the white. And there are a lot of dots in the white thermometer that are a lot lower than the gray. So that means that the 2 dots seem to be showing something really different. Like these white ones, there's a lot of white ones doing something different, and there's a lot of gray ones. But if you look at the cats and the dogs, every single one of those dots that is a dog could be a cat. They're exactly the same number pretty much. There's only one cat that's clearly different than all the dogs. Would you trust an experiment where only one animal is acting different? I would say no, because all these dog numbers, like there's an 8 for dogs and there's an 8 for cats, and there's a 6 for dogs and there's a 6 for cats. So we could say in a way that the dogs and the cats are pretty much the same, except for that one weird cat. And I wouldn't just make a general statement about cats based on one weird cat. Okay, so does everybody see how an all group discussion with everybody online together would work, with you raising hands. Okay, I'm going to take 2 questions before we move on to our last protocol of the day and our last half hour together. So if you have your hand up, check and see if your hand's up, and you can take it down by clicking the blue hand. I'm going to call on anyone with their hand up and say either an observation or a question you'd like to do before we move on. Robert, if you see them, you can call out their name and unclick them before I do. I'm having to scan the whole class here.
Just some commentary on weird cats. And Joanna, Nikki was talking about how, right now we're in a real world situation where data is a significant part of our daily.
Yeah, and I think you could use an example about when do we open the world? Let's debate about when do we open the world back up, and should we wear masks? I was looking for good articles about that because there's people on both sides of those opinions. So there's a lot that's really relevant right now. Okay, I'm going to call on Tiffany. I think Tiffany Odell, if you had something to share or a question. I unmuted you.
I did not have anything to share or a question. Sorry.
Okay. Oh no, that's great.
I love it. I definitely will use this. I love the weird cat part. That's pretty fun to introduce to 6th graders. 6th graders love weird things.
Yeah, every idea I stole from somebody. This comes from an NSTA book I can give you. But anyway, I'll be glad to share anything. Just feel free to email, because Robert and I, our job is to the museum wants to support teachers. So let us know what resources you need. Okay, now, instead of going to the small group breakout on this, we're going to go to the small group breakout on the last one. Okay, another example of stamping, having people stamp and then give their opinion, would be like a roller coaster. You could put this roller coaster up, and I want the class to stamp first. We're not going to do it, but where do you think the potential energy is the highest? And then I'm going to call on you one at a time to explain why you stamped D or why you stamped B. So there's lots of examples where you can stamp and then have a class discussion. Okay, our last protocol comes from the amazing Joanna Naring, okay? And it's a protocol that in the real classroom, we call it Stay Stray. And the idea is it's a critique, that we all create arguments and then we critique them. And so it's a social argumentation scaffolding strategy that simulates a real scientific poster session that scientists would do. So some people would call it a poster session. In education, we would call it a gallery walk. But you're like, what does that look like if we're online, right? It allows students to, I got to move my tools. 1 second, please. What's it say, Robert? Can you read it out? Critique each other's arguments or create arguments? I can't see it.
Argumentation, scaffolding.
Allow students to.
What is it did you need?
Can you read the first bullet, because it's covered up by all my controls?
A social argumentation scaffolding strategy that stimulates a scientific poster session, allowing students to see a variety of arguments.
Yeah, they get to see a variety of arguments, and they get to give each other feedback about their evidence and reasoning, which allows them then to go back and strengthen their argument. So our question that we're going to debate is relevant right now. And again, thank you, Joanna. It's called viruses. Are they alive or not? So we're going to watch a quick video. And if you have your pen or pencil ready, you can always jot down a few pieces of evidence you got from this video before I give you the article. Wait for it, wait for it. Okay, so right now we have a virus out there lurking among us, and it's killing people. And I apologize, I probably should have prefaced that movie by saying, I'm sorry if this particular topic has traumatized any of you, because there's real people that we deal with that have been affected. So I apologize. It's relevant in that we all want to understand this virus thing more, but it's also stressful and maybe could induce trauma if anybody in your among your students have had a loved one who have died or gotten very sick. So I should have done that ahead of time. I apologize, and I would recommend you do that. So we've introduced the phenomena, and this shows you how you can use video to introduce phenomena when you do have the students say once a week. Okay, so virus is alive or not. Robert, can you put up the poll? Because I'm going to have our group vote on whether they think viruses are living things. Are they alive or not? They can reproduce just like dogs or cats. I don't know. Are they alive? So why don't you guys vote on what you think? Viruses are alive or viruses are not alive? Thank you, Robert. When you get a second, use your reaction button to give Robert a thumbs up because he's been the best host ever today. You're like, I can't vote and do all this. Yes. Thanks, Tracy. Okay, we got 100% in, Robert. So go ahead and I'll end the poll. I think I can end it, and I'll share the results here since you should bask in all your clapping and thumbs up. Okay, so it looks like about 50-50. We got about 50-50, and I think that with your students, you're going to get that too. And it's not about being right. In science, no one knows the right answer. We have to figure it out. So let's start the process of figuring it out. I need to close that poll, and it's underneath your pictures at the moment. So, okay. So what we're going to, in a distance learning environment, this is what it's going to look like. If it's asynchronous, you're going to show the video, give them the article, and then you're going to send them to, say, a Google Doc where they can type in their evidence and their reasoning from the article they read, from the video they watched, and then they're going to type it in, and then you're going to say next week assignment is to read each argument, and in the box to the right, write down things you really like about this argument, write down questions that you have about this argument, write down things that you think you would disagree with that, but disagree with the idea, not the person, and give them a chance to write on the Google Doc their disagreement. We're going to do it again in a synchronous environment because you all woke up early and came online together. So we're going to do it together like it would look in a group. So step one, collect evidence from the text. So the first person in your group is going to play the host, again, for 3 sessions. And we're going to ask different group members to read aloud. So you're going to be opening an article that Robert will send the link to in the chat. You're going to open that article, and the host will say, I will begin by reading paragraph 1. Would you, Sandy, read paragraph 2? And then you'll go around and read the whole article. And each member opens the document, which is characteristics of viruses, reads a paragraph assigned by their host, and jots down on a piece of paper evidence that lends credit towards either the claim that they are alive. I'd have a column for alive and a column for not alive. And please, we have to remind our students, because what they tend to do and what people do is we come in with our elephants, we come in with our opinions, and all we do is look for evidence that supports our current opinion. So I want you to look for evidence for both. You know, maybe whatever you learned in college is wrong. Look for evidence that would go against the idea that they're alive too, or against the idea that they're not alive. Okay, so if you get time, you can open those charts and look for more evidence. Okay, so I'm going to give you 10 minutes, and we'll come back in 10 minutes. Okay, I got to send you to breakout groups. Type to us in the chat if we can help, or if you are having any kind of issues. Breakout groups, here we go. And don't worry about being wrong. Okay, so there you go. Let's read the article. You can pop into your rooms. and take turns reading. Robert has sent the link out in the chat. Thanks. I know you all know how to read, so I didn't want you to spend your whole time reading when we only got 20 minutes left, so, or 15 minutes left. So, okay. Is everybody? I don't think we have quite everybody, maybe. Okay, so the next step is going to be that the next step would be that if you watch, I'm going to show a video with a little more evidence, but yet not the full answer about whether they're alive. Then I would have you go create your arguments. So now you have evidence from the verse video, evidence from reading together, evidence from the second video, and you're going to open this shared Google Doc. Now I'm going to show you that Google Doc on my screen. So hang on a second. I'm going to pop out and I'm going to show you the actual Google Doc. Maybe. Yes. Okay, so I've created this Google Doc and I will put it in the resource file for you. Actually, Robert helped me create this. But you see here that that Google Doc has breakout groups on it. And if anybody's having trouble or they're getting, let me know. But here's the next thing you would do. You would go to this and you say, okay, we're breakout group 11. Or if you're doing it asynchronously, you put their names, Susie, Jose, whatever. And they click there. So breakout group 11 clicks and it jumps. It should jump. Yeah. It jumps down to breakout group 11's argument. And so breakout group 11's argument, they're going to say, okay, here's our claim. We've talked it over. I've done our reading. Or if they're doing it individually, Joe Schmo will say, I've decided viruses are alive. That's my claim. And so my evidence is, can you all see me typing on the screen? Nod your heads if you can see me typing on the screen.
Yes.
Viruses are alive. So I've decided that since my evidence is they reproduce. And my reasoning is if all plants and animals can reproduce, they must be alive. And of course, the group's job would be to find an example that would not work, like would name a living thing that doesn't reproduce. Okay, but I was doing this with my friend Beth, a teacher, and she said an interesting one that none of us as science teachers would even think about. She said, I think they're alive because I read that they mutate, that they can change or mutate, which really caused me as a biology teacher to think, is it true? Can all living things mutate? I guess they can. I think all living things can mutate. So if kids have studied DNA, that's an interesting line of reasoning that a kid's going to come up with that you, from all your training, I know the answer, is not going to come up with. So you would have, so to back up to the other, to back up, let me go back to the other screen, to the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint? Nod your heads if you can see the PowerPoint. Okay, so you would have gone to this chart. You would have typed in either synchronously or asynchronously your claim. Thank you, Joanna Naring, because she came up with this. And you would type in your claim, your evidence, your reasoning, and that would be step 2. You could either do it in a live session together, or you could do it on your own at home. And then next week when we come back, we're going to look at everybody's argument. Then we go to round 3. And round 3 would look like this. In round 3, we're all going to open up the same one. And you notice the green boxes on the right. I gave them a few prompts, and I would like you to help your classmates with argumentation. I don't want you to win. I want you to go through and say, I really like how clearly you stated that. I'm going to steal that for my argument. Or to write, you know, I question this because I don't think all living things necessarily, I can think of some living things some non-living things that grow. So you said growing, but candles can grow and they're not alive. So I want you to try to find reason to counter their argument as well. And then in the green boxes, they type that. Then if you have them all synchronously, let's go through and look at all the things people have written and see if we could do it. So if you were doing this live, I would do this. I would say group number 1, you're going to click on group number 2, and you're going to type in their box some feedback. Group number 5, you're going to click on group number 6 and give them some feedback, because otherwise the thing that could go wrong is that you could have everybody typing on one argument, right? Everybody could be giving feedback to group number 3. So you're going to give feedback to the next group after your group. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. They type feedback on the green side. They give counter evidence and reasoning. And if they get stuck in their groups, you can always remind them, call me and I'll help you with some examples. In fact, like I did, I would model it first. One of you mentioned modeling is important. I would model what typing on the dock looks like. If you can go live.
Tim, we
Okay.
have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Carolyn is asking, in terms of forming groups, how do you do that? Or do you, Carolyn, you want to get on the mic and be more?
Yeah, please.
Oh, you're muted, honey.
There we go.
Okay.
Sorry, takes me a minute.
I get it.
My question is, how ideally would you form your groups? After the first video, would you then put them into groups based on similar preconceptions, or would you do it randomly? I'm thinking if they're all similar in their initial thoughts, that might help them versus trying to, tussle it out as they're writing.
Interesting. Yeah. For those of you who don't know Zoom, you can assign the groups. I just randomized you today, but you can assign people to the groups. So if you find a group that's just functional, move somebody. If you find a group that everybody's thinking the same, maybe just the opposite, Carolyn, maybe move somebody into that group that has another way of thinking. When assigning the groups, I would really encourage that once you start the activity, not to move them in and out of groups. Let them find the alternative thinking by reading other arguments. Because if they start moving around, they're not sure, is this my argument or is this somebody else's argument? And so I think though that you could go through between weeks and say, I want the people in group number 3 to look at group number 1's argument because they're coming up with completely something different. I like group number 5 to look at number 2. So you could do that too, Carolyn. I like your thinking about strategic grouping. It's one more step, and I think it's a great idea, but if you yourself are just learning how to mute and unmute, go easy on yourself, go easy on the kids. Get used to those tools, right? Carolyn, you're awesome. Any other questions? Does that answer your question? Okay, Robert, were there any other questions?
Well, Mike just brought up an interesting point. Would mutation be a form of growth and development? That's a good question.
Yeah, is mutation the same as growth? I think that's a big topic. And as a biology teacher, I would tend to say no, that we get bigger, but we don't get bigger by mutating. Like our DNA doesn't change every time we get new cells. But I would say that all species can mutate, maybe not every organ. I think almost every organism does. My understanding is almost every one of us has mutations during our life. They're called cancer. And sometimes our body overrides it and gets rid of it or fixes it. And other times it doesn't, and we manifest cancer. So good question. Interesting. I love science nerds. Okay, any other questions, Robert, or should we move on and wind this up? We got 7 minutes.
We got 5 minutes.
Okay, Robert always, yes.
I like how you guys do this. I originally did this activity, you guys, with them putting their own charts for their groups into a Google slideshow. And then you can comment underneath the slides when you ask questions and so forth. I like this better, but you could go a step further where the groups actually put theirs in. Maybe there's 2 sides of it where one group, they agree for the most part that it is alive or not alive, and they can separate them out so that the opposite kind of groups can look at each other's other ideas. That might be a way to go as well.
Yeah, great idea. Of course, it comes from the person who built this whole thing. So give her go to your reactions button. Applause for Joanna.
They can go another step further. I was thinking for next year where they could have different ideas and then look at each other's work for the opposite idea of what their group came up with. So.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Joanna, especially for that last example. Here we go. We're going to end the day. First of all, I'd like to review some key points that we've learned about or thought about today. If I can just move my window away from, okay. So where do you have opportunities to let students figure out rather than learn about science? So where do you have the opportunity to not give them the answer, but let them kind of wrestle with it? Okay. The second thing, take away from
Tim,
yes?
We don't see your screen.
You don't see my screen at all right now? Okay, let me go to, okay, so I'm gonna have to go, I'll stop share and go back into share. Thank you. Okay, so share screen. go to PowerPoint. Okay, key point number 1. Can you see it now, Robert?
Yeah.
Okay, where do you have opportunities to let your students figure out rather than just learn about cells or viruses? Second of all, practice your tools first and get those habits down, because working memory can't think about science and also try to open documents. So make it easy on yourself and them. Third, establish routines. Get used to one routine before you try all 3 of these great ideas. Okay, and let me know as you come up with new online ideas. We're all learning this. Okay, finally, argumentation strategies. We had that first thing, which some people call a discussion diamond, where you have 4 articles. We each bring something to the discussion that wasn't there. We had poll in chat, where we asked a poll about the hot water and the cold water, and then you typed in the chat. We had agree, disagree stamp, where you stamped which one of the experiments you liked better and why you trusted it more, and then we discussed it as a whole class. And finally, we had stay, stray, where we're working on a common doc, we're creating arguments, we're critiquing each other's arguments. Okay, so stop for a second in your mind and ask yourself, what protocol would you like to eat that you saw today? Would you like to adapt or implement maybe right now or this week or next week after you get used to online teaching? And how could you use that with your students? You know your students, I don't, and you know whether it would work. So, second of all, what thing might you try this week to just ask your students to start making claims and supporting it with evidence and reasoning? Also, Robert and I started a new program during this time of virtual learning called Tools and Tea Time on Tuesdays. It's mostly fun. We feature one tool every week that you may not have thought of. We feature an expert from a school district or a school talking about what they're doing that's working. And we also let you talk to each other every week. So that's a half an hour from 4:30 to 5 every Tuesday. We'll send you the link for that as well. And finally,
I want to chime in here.
Yeah.
On the 28th, we actually have a special guest. I'm going to get on the camera again. On the 28th, we have a special guest, Lori DeSaltels. She works with students, with kids that have trauma-related issues, and she teaches at Butler University. She's going to do a session about how the brain changes in terms of trauma, how we can help to support kids to self-regulate better. Given our current situation, this is a serious consideration, not only for kids, but for us as teachers and also parents. So it'll be a really good session. I encourage you to participate in it. I will send you information.
That's a week from Tuesday, right? Okay. The last thing is we've at the museum, we've all pitched in and we've tried to create lessons that can be done at home with everyday ordinary home materials. And if you check it out on our museum webpage, dmns.org, go to the section Learn, and you'll see a new page called DMNS at Home. And part of it, it's watch, do, and teach. So there's videos made by our really fun, lively educators. There's also a section called Teach that has lesson plans you can use, and they're for different ages. So pass the word. We're trying to support, and we really do want to continue to support you as you move into this brave new world. I'm going to take my screen away so you can all see each other. And I would like you, if you go to that little icon that looks like a checkerboard and click on it, look at all the amazing people that are out there this morning on a Saturday morning, out with each other, trying to do better for their students. We're all stressed out. We don't know where this is going. And
some people are at Disneyland. Some people are in an
yeah. I've known you've done this, for 31 years. You worry about your kids. Now you have to worry about everybody. And just thank you for taking on the worry and the charge of doing your best. We love you. Let us know what we can do to support you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Recording will be on the website, and we'll also send it out to you.
Thanks for the claps.
Be safe, and let us know how we can help.